think we can start. Yep. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming this evening. Welcome to the Community Forum with the Ontario election candidates, hosted jointly by the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce, the Anishinaabe Business Professional Association, the Aguasaban Chamber of Commerce, the Thunder Bay and District Labour Council, and the Thunder Bay Public Library, as well as the Thunder Bay Real Estate Board. Our thanks also goes to Confederation College for hosting our event tonight. So, Bonjour, Charmaine McCraw Nadishnakas. My name is Charmaine McCraw. I am the Vice Chair of the Board of the Thunder Bay Public Library and a community member of Thunder Bay for the last 12 years. So we begin tonight with the acknowledgement that the City of Thunder Bay has been built on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe peoples of Fort William First Nation, original signatories to the Robinson Superior Treaty in 1850. We recognize the significant contributions of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people to our heritage, social, cultural, spiritual, and economic wealth. Please ensure that all your cell phones are set to silent for the duration of the event. The audience is asked to remain quiet while candidates are speaking, and applause is welcome after each candidate's response. The order of speaking and seating assignment for each riding have been determined by draw. Questions will rotate from stage right to left and will alternate between the Thunder Bay Superior North and Thunder Bay Atikokan candidates. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for their answer. Our timekeeper will raise a notice card when there is 10 seconds left, and then a red card when the time is out. I remind the candidates here this evening that you have pledged to be respectful of each other, to not engage in name calling, and to not interrupt each other when speaking. Candidates will not use inappropriate language and follow the direction of myself. Questions tonight will be posed by our event partner panelists. So we have Jason Rasevich, President of the Anishinaabe Business Professional Association. And we have Stephanie Pichot, Board Director of the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce, and potentially a latecomer, Karen Hill from the Thunder Bay Real Estate Board. I will be posing questions that were submitted in advance from the public to the Thunder Bay Public Library. So we will get started with 90-second opening statements by each candidate. So we'll start with you, Stephen. 90 seconds on the clock.
Okay. After 7 years of Doug Ford, people in Thunder Bay Atikokan are struggling to get ahead and feeling left behind by their provincial government. It's time for a fresh start and a government that believes in investing in people and the programs and services they rely on. The Ontario Liberals are about getting back to basics, whether it's ensuring you have a family doctor, investing in our education system, building more housing, or making life more affordable. We want to ensure that there's more for you. Leadership is about priorities. We know what Doug Ford's priorities have been: a spa, a tunnel, and alcohol sales. It's time for a government that has your back and one that ensures we have an economy that works for everyone in our society. Leadership is also about showing up, and I'm disappointed to see our incumbent MPP absent tonight. Thunder Bay is my home. It's where I grew up, where I was educated, and where I volunteer. I love my community, and I know there's so much potential here. We just need a provincial partner who's willing to work with us to achieve this. Having worked for MPP Michael Gravel, I know the task ahead as an elected representative. I got to advocate for so many constituents during that time. But now I want to be your champion at Queen's Park. On February 27th, or during these advanced polls, I hope I can count on your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And Judith?
Hello, I'm Judith Monteith Farrell, and I'm running to be your MPP in Thunder Bay Atikokan. I've been privileged to be your MPP from 2018 to 2025. And during that time, I worked tirelessly for this community. This election is a farce. Doug Ford has called an election when we are in crisis in this country. We need to work together. He says he can protect us. He can't protect the homeless. He hasn't protected us in hospitals. We are waiting longer and longer at emergency rooms. We have more and more people who are poor, who can't feed themselves. Our food banks are at record numbers. 7 years, we have seen this mess. And I'm here because I believe that our party and my work will help this community get to a place where fairness is once again something that's a priority, not the priorities of this Ford government, not the priorities of the Conservatives. Their priority is to make money for their rich friends, and it's unacceptable. We need to fix this province.
Thank you, Judith. And 90 seconds on the clock for Lise. Go ahead.
Thank you. Oops, right. Thank you very much. Bonjour, bonjour, and good evening. Responsible government means using public dollars to keep healthcare universal, to support public education so that every child has a chance to grow and succeed. Responsible government means bringing back rent control, building affordable housing, supporting community-based housing initiatives, and doing what is needed to improve our highways. For the last 30 years of Conservative and Liberal governments, we have seen a steady erosion of the services that everyone needs. First, the Harris Conservatives helped themselves to millions in profits from long-term care. They started the gutting of education and healthcare, which the Liberals continued, and since then we've seen the massive transfer of public assets into private hands. Assets that should be bringing revenue to the province, like Highway 407, sold off by the Conservatives, and Hydro One, sold off by the Liberals. Successive provincial governments have also increased your costs by downloading costs to municipalities, privatizing healthcare, cutting funding for education, including school bus funding, and leaving parents with huge costs if their children have special needs. In a wealthy province like Ontario, it should be possible for everyone to have a decent life, whether a person is working, studying, raising a family, living on a pension, or living with a disability. We have the kind of services that people need. We can have the kind of services that people need when Ontario dollars go to support services that benefit all Ontarians.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lise. And go ahead, 90 seconds on the clock, Brian.
Yeah, well, thank you for your acknowledgement, your land acknowledgement, Charmaine. Though this election was unnecessary and yet another example of wasteful Conservative spending, we have an opportunity to now elect leadership that understands our unique challenges. We have some of the highest rates of homelessness, opioid poisonings, and violent crime in the country. Our housing prices continue to climb while life gets even more unaffordable. More than 25% of us do not have a family doctor, while our youth have never struggled harder to enter the job market. We can and must do better. I entered this race because I have the experience and energy required to address the challenges we are facing today and tomorrow. As a small business owner for more than 20 years, I know what it takes to succeed. As a city councillor for the last 6 years, I have a deep understanding of what it takes for municipalities to succeed. As the chair of the Social Services Administration Board, I understand the importance of taking care of our most vulnerable citizens. Over the past 6 years, I've collectively balanced more than $3 billion of budgets at the City of Thunder Bay. I've also led delegations to Queen's Park to advocate for a stronger social safety net. And I continue to sit with regional leaders on the Economic Development Commission. And through it all, even when the going gets tough, I've remained present, accountable, and informed to my constituents. This is my commitment to you. This is the energy I'm bringing to Greenstone, Red Rock, Armstrong, and Marathon. We are going to build a strong and united Northern Front and take this energy to Queen's Park and build a kinder, prouder Thunder Bay Superior North. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, we're going to shift to some questions here. So Jason, you're first.
Okay, thank you for those intros. On behalf of the Anishinaabe Business Professional Association, we advocate for inclusion of Indigenous peoples across Northern Ontario. This first question is around equitable access to education and healthcare. So how will you, if elected, how will you ensure that Indigenous peoples have that equitable access to education and healthcare? And how will Indigenous self-determination play a role in that?
And this question is for Thunder Bay Superior North, and Lise, you can answer first.
Okay, so first of all, we need to be aware that some of the healthcare is federal, but the provincial government has a responsibility also to step up and make sure that anybody living in a First Nations community does have access to healthcare, and that commitment has always been there with us. In terms of education, again, there are many interesting questions around that, because when it's possible to keep education in communities, particularly when students are relatively young, that's critical. We know how challenging it is for students to come into Thunder Bay. Can be a very good thing, but it can also take them away from their communities. So I'm very happy to see the kind of work that is taking place in communities. In terms of businesses and relationships with First Nations, it's critical that we're always talking free, prior, informed consent has to be the undergirding for every single thing that is done between governments relating with First Nations governments, nation to nation. And we have seen that has not been going very well, I'll have to say. There's been a divide and conquer strategy used by the current Conservative government. But I can say that in my time as the MPP, I have traveled throughout the region. There are 11 First Nations communities in Thunder Bay Superior North, and I have met with all of them and look forward to deepening those relationships. Thank you.
Thank you, Lise. And Brian?
Yeah. Well, look, and thanks for the question. Like, we are not going anywhere without our First Nations partners. Like, this community is absolutely critical to set the standard nationally for a united, diverse community. One of the things that the Ontario Liberals introduced, which I'm really proud of, is a 40,000 spaces for intern job opportunities for youth. And I see Indigenous youth actually taking up a lot of those spaces. One of the things as the McKellar Ward councillor, a lot of kids are not going to school. They're literally not going to school right now, and that's a big problem. So people are getting left behind. They are sometimes many years behind, and I've seen it, and it's problematic. One of the things that's getting kids to school, though, is supportive environments where their families are supported. One of the things that we did at the City of Thunder Bay was provide transit for families and under 12s, and that enabled families to get ahead, to provide for their families, and indeed provide opportunities for those kids. But education is absolutely critical moving forward, and you know, further, the youth actually have to see themselves in a future here in Thunder Bay. We need to create exposure to not only trades but to emergency services. We need to see more racially diverse situations in our police and emergency services. And we have to create those spaces and make sure that those policies are enshrined provincially and locally throughout the district.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, the next question is posed to the Thunder Bay Atikokan candidates. This is a question received from the public through the public library. The opioid crisis in Northern Ontario is killing communities, and when people do make the decision to take a step in the right direction, they have to wait weeks and sometimes months for a detox bed and pay even more for private treatment. What strategic partnerships will you create to provide more detox facilities, treatment programs, and aftercare programs? And Stephen, go ahead, you're first.
Well, thank you for the question. So this thing has touched pretty much everybody in Thunder Bay, and especially for people of my generation. There's been many people I went to high school with, many people I know, and there's a lost generation out there. So something needs to be done. We have a government that likes to talk about investing, but we just don't see them at the table. They like to talk about creating detox, but we really don't see the spaces here in Thunder Bay. And Thunder Bay in northwestern Ontario has some of the highest rates in our province, so we need those investments. I think the other thing is working with community partners. We need a government that's not just focused in Toronto. We need one that listens to the voices of people right here who are frontline workers on the ground in Thunder Bay and communities across Thunder Bay Atikokan, to listen to them to come up with what can be a solution made in-home here and how the provincial government can be a partner and work with them. But it's also about looking at the whole picture. So making sure that people have access to an economy that works for them, doubling ODSP, working on mental health supports, investing in people at the start of their life so they have the best foot forward. So I think, if I was lucky enough to be the elected representative, having worked and volunteered in this community, I've seen some of those people firsthand, and I want to work with them and champion them at Queen's Park.
Thank you, Stephen. And Judith?
I think the question has to be, why has this been allowed to happen? What is happening? This is not a surprise. But during the time when I was MPP, the safe consumption site was just about to open. And one of the first orders of business was that the Doug Ford government was going to close all of them. We fought to keep ours open, but now it's being closed. And you can't detox people who are dead. And when you talk to the parents and the grandparents and the husbands and wives and children of people who have lost their lives, they tell you the first step is we need to keep them safe. The second thing is the detox bed. There needs to be an investment. This is a crisis. We have put forward legislation time and again to call this the crisis it is. And this government the Ford government voted it down. It's not a crisis, even though it's happening across this province and even more now. And we also know that this is keenly tied to mental health. We do not have the support for mental health for our children, our teens, our adults. And so people are self-medicating, and they are turning to drugs and are losing their lives. So this is a mandatory investment that the government has to make. It's unacceptable that people would actually
Thank you,
lose
Judith.
their lives.
Your time's up.
Sorry.
All right, next question is posed to Thunder Bay Superior North candidates from the Thunder Bay Real Estate Board. If elected, what would you do to address the housing crisis in our communities?
Right, so I've actually had the opportunity to meet twice with the members of the Real Estate Board, once in town and once at Queen's Park. And what we talked about really is the importance of creating affordable housing. That's very key to the NDP's housing plan. And I was also able to talk about two projects that have been very important here that the Conservative government has not been interested in supporting, and that is Suomikoti, which wants to build another tower for seniors, and Giwe on Court, which is a partnership between Bitikong Anishinaabe First Nation and Fort William First Nation. And both of these projects, they're community-based, they're actually not-for-profit, and they would be providing housing. You think of 60 units of seniors housing, how many houses that actually opens up on the market. So we know that all of these pieces need to fit together, and we also know that the fact that there is no affordable housing ties into the opioid addiction situation, because when people come free from their addictions, they have to go back and live in exactly the same unsafe situation they were in before. So we also know, so these two projects, for example, could take place under our plan because of low-cost financing, which is what needs to happen. We'd also like to be building in the business of building co-ops again. We haven't done that kind of thing since the 90s. Liberals and Conservatives have said no. We say yes. It's time we brought that kind of housing back with the support of government.
Thank you, Judith. Brian?
Well,
Sorry,
well,
please.
let me just, as a renter, I think there's a real big disconnect with people that are actually living where they're paying off their mortgages, and for those of us that are in the rental market. People that are in mortgages maybe don't understand the depth of the crisis that we're in right now. I don't think the governing party has any idea how difficult it is in the rental market. It is absolutely cutthroat. It has been very difficult to secure housing, but further, when you have housing, you actually live in an air of fear. So it's absolutely critical to develop housing. Like we've heard from people knocking on doors, I think every other person on the stage has seen that. We need more, not just units, but we need affordable housing. So the Liberal plan is to actually cut some of the development charges. I know we don't have development charges, but we have land transfer tax. There's things that we could do to encourage not just unit or suburban development, but multi-res and mixed neighborhoods. We got to do this right across the region. Thunder Bay Superior North is not just Thunder Bay, of course, in a place not very far from here, Greenstone, they have tremendous economic potential, and they have a lack of not just housing, but affordable housing as well. So we have to get aggressive about our housing targets. So the Liberal government is planning on making investments similar to what we're seeing right now, but we do need partners at the table. We do need partners to lead the projects and have provincial funding ultimately backstop the projects that are moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. The next question is posed to Thunder Bay Atikokan and from the Chamber. Stephanie.
Just want to say thank you for your answers so far. We've got a question here. Chambers, municipalities, and community associations across Northern Ontario have called for immediate set-aside of 3,000 spots for Northern communities within the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. This is a fast track for newcomers to settle in Ontario that involves no new program spending. The staff are already in place, working to progress applications almost exclusively for the GTA. Will you, if elected, support this change so that rural and Northern Ontario will get a guaranteed portion of this highly successful program? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. And I think it's key that, we have a provincial government that really focuses on investing in Northwestern Ontario and especially Northern Ontario. So I think it's a great thing. Right now, the GTHA does not need more people coming to it. They have a population problem. But if you look at rural and northern communities, they really do need people to sustain their populations and to grow. So obviously it's working with those communities. It's not just Thunder Bay, there's the surrounding communities all the way to Atikokan, working with them. I know we received a letter from one of our rural municipalities championing this. This is something that's key, and it's about bringing new people into our communities, growing our communities together. So I think it's a great example of something we can do working with communities and chambers about making an economy that works for everyone.
Thank you. Go ahead, Judith.
A couple of days ago, I was in Atikokan, and I saw and met a couple of new people, immigrants, that had just come to that community. And it was 40 below, and I think the shock of the cold weather, they both said to me they didn't know what they were getting into. So I agree that these 3,000 spots that the Chamber and that rural communities have asked for are very important. And I thought it was very insightful that small communities and communities like ourselves were also looking at housing and wraparound services for folks that were coming to this area. We have the capacity in a smaller community to do that sort of hands-on. And I thought that was very thoughtful of the rural people asking for this help. But we are a community of immigrants. I'm first generation. I'm sure many of you in this room are first or second generation, and we know that we're proud to make Canada our home, and we should welcome people who want to come here and to make our communities better.
Thank you. The next question is posed to Thunder Bay Superior North from Jason.
Okay. What specific actions will you take to address the disproportionately high rates of violence towards Indigenous women and girls in the region and implement a national inquiry and calls for justice?
Well, it's interesting. I was speaking with Annabedi Achnipanishkum this morning about that issue, and there needs to be funding, in part, directed so that people in community can do the work that is needed. And from what she was telling me, that money is actually not there. In Ontario, we've actually been dealing with a pretty misogynistic government, I would say. Gender-based violence has been difficult to bring forward and resisted. And so even having the acknowledgement of the violence being experienced by First Nations women is difficult to raise. But we know that supports have to be there. We know we need to work together with the federal government also to make this happen. Federal government sort of did the work, and then it's been dropped. Like, we have not seen the supports. We haven't actually seen anything happen that is intervening in the violence that people are experiencing. So part of it is attitudinal, that the recognition of that reality needs to be there, but also part of it needs to be how we take up our responsibilities as government representatives to make sure that people in community get the support that they've identified that they need.
Well, you know, look, gender-based violence is an issue right across Canada, but nowhere is experiencing it really more than Thunder Bay in the north. We know, you know, just only a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago at City Council, we had, you know, a group come to us saying and identifying that there is very few beds. There's simply not enough beds. We need to have a government that's committed to actually creating beds. You know, many people actually trying to flee violence have nowhere to go, and they're stuck in their homes. And they do, you know, to Lisa's point, they lack the wraparound supports required to help them not only find housing for themselves and their children, but to leave and to start a brand new life. We need the government supports. Like, without beds right now currently, we are kind of stuck on a hamster wheel where we're stuck in a constant crisis mode. It can't be the way. We know that domestic violence is probably one of the predominant cases that Thunder Bay Police are currently responding to. It can't be the way. We live in a very aggressive, kind of violent community. We know we suffer from you know, substance abuse. We also suffer from poverty, and both of those mixed together actually make for a terrible environment, especially for women and gender-based people that are experiencing gender-based violence. We absolutely cannot do this without provincial government help. The Liberal government will look at this very seriously and create those beds, because right now that has to be part of the housing continuum. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so to the Thunder Bay Atikokan, another question from the public through the library. The cost of food continues to rise locally in the district, and never mind Ontario's far north. What is your party doing to stop grocery prices from rising even farther?
Well, thank you for the question, and let's talk about affordability in Doug Ford's Ontario. So under Doug Ford, things have only got more expensive. You know, I'm someone who likes to cook and bake, and I could tell you how much the cost of butter has gone up in the last number of years. And you know what, that's someone for me, I have a great job, but I think of all those people who I used to help when I was working for an MPP, who are on ODSP, on OW, people who are making a wage that just isn't livable these days, and they have to try to afford a higher rent and higher food costs. And how are people supposed to make those decisions? And it's even harder when they have kids, because what do you put first? What do you prioritize? So I think there's a few things we could do as an Ontario Liberal government. One of the things we want to do is cut HST off of home heating, which would be an immediate saving for people, and something that instead of a $200 one-time check, it's something that affects them every month. The other thing, too, it's, I think, working with the federal government to lobby some of these companies in Ontario. And, you know, the Weston's got a $200 check. I don't think they needed that. And I think it's time that we don't give handouts to those. We actually work on making sure that there's fair and equitable pricing right here in Ontario.
Well, the affordability crisis is something that, you know, is affecting so many people in our community, with food bank usage just skyrocketing, and that's not sustainable. So we know that people on OW and ODSP and fixed incomes need support so that they can have the dignity of buying their own food. And so ODSP and OW rates have to be doubled, and then they have to be geared to the inflation rate, because people need to eat. They need to feed their kids. I'm part of a Isthmus group where we pack backpacks for kids, and it's a pitiful amount of food that we're sending home with children so they have something to eat over the weekend. There is something so fundamentally wrong with that in a society as rich as ours. And that we, when was Doug Ford during the debate was asked, well, we need to increase ODSP rates. He said, we can't afford that. We can't afford that when we can afford to give out $200 checks to folks that don't need it. Our party has a commitment to stop the gouging. We need to have a check and balance in when people are making unbelievable profits on food. And we also need to ensure that people have subsidies when they don't have enough food. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For the question posed to Thunder Bay Superior and North candidates from the Real Estate Board.
Hi there. An entire generation is currently priced out of the real estate market. This directly impacts our community as young, hardworking people move away. What would you do to help keep young people here and help them find an affordable place to live?
Okay, so there are several issues within there and several points. I mean, the first thing is we do need rent control. Rents have gone through the roof. And they're way beyond what people can afford. That's the first thing. Also, we need to be actually having pieces in place so we know that entire buildings have gone over to short-term rentals, Airbnbs. That's not acceptable. People have been evicted from those places. Those places, at the very least, should be paying the MAP tax in the city, and also there should be a limit on the number that a person can own and control. So that's a piece of it. We also know that we need to be building affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, so that people have that there are options. And when that affordable housing exists, that's also going to put pressure on the market to bring down some of those prices that are so over the top right now. I think those are probably the main points that I would hit. Again, I said earlier we want to have affordable financing, and we know that there are community groups ready to build now. They were ready to build 2 years ago, had that affordable financing been there for them. Thank you.
So, I mean, we talk about building new units, and we have to do that too, but, you know, Northwestern Ontario has some of the oldest housing stock in the country. I think the average home in Northwestern Ontario is about 50 years old or older. So we actually are at risk of actually losing housing stock too. So it's not just about, building new homes. But also we need some help from the federal government. In 1990s, CMH, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, actually stopped doing big legacy housing projects. And that's actually where the federal government dropped the ball. The federal government downloaded that to the province, and here we are stuck holding the ball how many years later. This issue is actually preventable. Up till then, actually, Canada was building lots and lots of houses with federal government support. When that was passed to the province dropped the ball on it over decades and decades, and we have just not seen that housing stock. So here we are in a situation where affordability is out of control. But this is true worldwide currently. So in the interim, the Liberal plan is to make buying a home affordable by eliminating some of those initial costs when you're getting into your first home. That's going to be absolutely critical. But more stock alone isn't going to help. We do need incentives to get people into first-time home ownership. The Liberal plan would actually reduce the land transfer tax and actually create credits for home renovations and adding units to existing homes. Thank you.
All right, next question for Thunder Bay Outakokan from the Chamber.
With many northern communities facing economic pressures because of uncertainty in the forestry sector, which is heightened by the threats of U.S. tariffs, what does your party plan to do to support the forestry industry, and how will you help revitalize it? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Obviously, forestry has been a key component of Northern Ontario's economy, and it's time we had a government that works with businesses and partners in the forestry sector. It's key that, forestry's changed. The market's different now, especially when we're dealing with companies based in Brazil that have different products. But Canada is still a great producer of it. And even with threats from terrorists of the United States, if they want to do the housing boom that President Trump is talking about, they need hardwood from Canada. So with or without the tariffs, we know that there is a good, bright future for hardwood here in Canada. So I think it's about really working with those forestry partners, working with them, finding solutions on how we can promote their businesses, on how we can cut red tape for their businesses, but also, too, about innovation and how do we make our products the best products in the world. So I'd be really excited to be the MPP, to work with the forestry sector again. I got to work with Michael when he was the forestry minister, so I look forward to that.
In my time as MPP, I was working with the forestry industry, and I learned that they are very resilient, but they already suffer from a tariff in softwood or lumber, and we weren't very successful at pushing that back. But they are about value added. So there is so much innovation going on in that sector, and I think that what is needed or required is an opening up of markets across borders, across provincial borders, but also supporting those great innovations that are happening in that sector with support. But they are very independent folks. When I've dealt with them, they are really not looking for a lot of hands-on. They want to be able to work with partners, but are there asking for supports around innovations and perhaps some help around their if they are facing a direct crisis.
All right, and posed to Thunder Bay Superior North, Jason.
The Paris Agreement for reducing greenhouse gases by 30% by 2030 has been now pushed to 2035. And when we think of Northern Ontario as a critical minerals hub for lithium, graphite, copper, and other needs, it's hard to ignore the opportunities there for resource extraction and mining the Northwest. However, there's challenges with meeting the basic constitutional rights of First Nations duty to consult, where communities have achieved injunctions regarded to not even meeting that bare minimum over the last few years. We've seen British Columbia implement the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, free prior informed consent, into their legislation for provincial permitting. How will your government advance the province from some of the challenges we've seen with mining, especially in the Ring of Fire, around consent-based decision-making, supporting First Nations as decision-makers in mining projects?
Okay, so in the last 2.5 years, while I have had the privilege of being the MPP at Queen's Park, I'm aware of at least 5 First Nations that have come to Queen's Park repeatedly and been refused a meeting with the Premier or with the Minister of Forestry, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not how you make, that's not responsible government. It's certainly not respectful towards those First Nations. So we know free prior informed consent is the baseline. Consultation is great, but consultation is not consent, and that needs to be very clear from the outset. We also know that there are some very responsible mining companies out there, and we've met with them, and many of those have actually made very strong agreements with First Nations. So I think of Generation Mining, for example, and Bittigong Anishinaabe, which took many years to establish that agreement, but it's a very positive one that has also worked very hard to mitigate the potential pollution from something like that. We know these things are possible. RockTech also has a very, very strong proposal for processing lithium and partnering with Rocky Bay. And that processing facility, they spent a lot of time trying to explain it to me, which I really appreciated and respected, because it's circular as much as possible, so that they are really thinking ahead to their own children, to all the people who live here, and reducing the potential for pollution from that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, as you dig into these issues, it's absolutely evident that Indigenous groups, partners, and First Nations want to be at the table. They are willing partners in industrial development of their own lands, but they want to be partners in that development. On the environmental piece, it's absolutely critical that we work with industry to develop the innovative solutions. Industry, ultimately, when there's a price on pollution or where there's an initiative that's federally sponsored and provincially sponsored, industry is going to be forced and compelled to actually make those innovations that are going to actually protect the environment and allow our industries here in the north to become more sensitive to the environment, but also more sustainable. We also have to be cognizant of the workforce of tomorrow. We need to bring, we got to get people working. People up north want to be part of the job opportunities that are coming. There's a massive economic opportunity at our doorstep. The Liberal Party will, Bonnie Cromie was just here just a few weeks ago, and she reiterated a very important thing to the questioner's point about we have to have the partnerships. We have to develop our industrial capacity with First Nations hand in hand, and that has to go. Premier Ford's bulldoze the way to the Ring of Fire is not going to work. It's a non-starter, and we have partners that are ready and willing to be part of the process.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, posed to Thunder Bay Atacocan from the library board, the public through the library. So this one is in regards to safety of our highways. Almost daily we see accidents with large trucks involved, and I'm wondering, what is your plan to make our roads in the north safer?
Well, thank you for the question. So I recently did a video at Sistinen's Corner, which is infamous here. We have a premier right now who's focused on building this great tunnel along the 401. That money should be invested in our northern highways because we need more investments there. So I got to work for Michael. He was big on twinning Thunder Bay to Nipigon. I want to focus on twinning Thunder Bay to Chappaqua because we need to get those plans in place now because it takes a little bit of time to get those highways built. So I think twinning all of 11, 17 where it's combined, and also working on 11 and 17 when they're separated as well. It's also working with the federal government to make sure that people on our roads are driving at the safest and highest standards. But highways are a lifeline for people here in Northwestern Ontario. We don't have rail access. If you live in a regional or a rural community around us, you need to get into Thunder Bay for a doctor's appointment, a dentist appointment, sometimes to go shopping. So those highways are key, and we need to make sure that they are the safest they can be for people driving on them, and that also includes winter maintenance. So right now, only the Thunder Bay Expressway is Class 1 by the MTO. We need to expand Class 1 for Northern Ontario highways, and I want to be the champion at Queen's Park that gets that done.
Recently, Lisa and I were endorsed by the Truckers for Safer Highways, and because we've been working on the ideas and the need for safer highways around Thunder Bay. One thing that we hear time and again, and we need infrastructure, of course, but we also need that the drivers be properly trained for the road conditions in our area. And right now, the same companies that are training people are giving them their licenses. And there's very little regulation, and none really. There should be oversight by the MTO, but there is very little or none. And we see drivers that are not qualified and not trained for the conditions they face on our highways. And we've all had a close call. We've all been, where transport is on our tail and where it's a bad road conditions. Guy Brouin, MPP, has put forward legislation time again trying to get the maintenance levels increased in Northern Ontario, voted down by the Conservative government for some reason. They say our highways are fine, the safest in all the world, according to them, because everything's grandiose. We've been working on it, and those pieces are important along with the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. And question to Thunder Bay Superior North from the Real Estate Board.
Okay, I know we already kind of touched on this, but to expand a little, do you support making it easier for first-time home buyers to get into the market? And what can you do to ensure that happens?
Yes. So we know there are various tools available. I remember when I got my first house, I was allowed to use my RSP as a down payment. That is certainly an option that's there. I think we've heard that they're also, not having to pay the land transfer tax on your very first home. I think that was the case with my first home as well. So we actually know what the tools are, and it's a matter, again, of bringing them back and putting them in place so that young people have that option. And again, having more affordable housing on the market can bring down the cost, cool the market down so that there's actually homes that younger people can afford.
Thank you. The government can't buy your house for you. We need to build an economy that people are making good dollars, good jobs. We need to promote skills development, and we need to get people into jobs that pay. I mean, there's only so much we can do, and we've touched on to some degree on a lot of the things that government can do, but we need to build a strong, robust northern economy that's going to support home ownership. There's a lot of young people right now leaving college, university, that need to get out in there. The Liberal Healthcare Plan is really touches on to living wages for PSWs, to pay nurses appropriately, paying our educators appropriately. The government is not going to come in and buy your house for you. So while there are incentives for first-time home buyers, we need to focus also on building an economy that's going to support home ownership and move people forward into not only propel them into the job market, but into a robust economy that there's a future for them to be in. So I agree with the question. We want to see people get into their first home. I agree actually with Lise about developing and building more affordable housing as well, but we really ultimately have to build a strong economy so people can find themselves here, situate, stay here in the north, and that's an important part of what I want to be MPP, make sure we build a strong economy to support the vibrancy and the populations of the north for future generations.
Thank you, Brian. And last question for the evening from the Chamber to pose to Thunder Bay Atikokan.
Confederation College and Lakehead University are building the workforce of today and tomorrow, but are facing growing financial pressures, including rising costs, the cut and freeze to tuition, frozen provincial per-student operating grants that are the lowest in Canada, and impacts of federal international student permit changes. What will you and your party do to ensure that our post-secondary institutions continue to maintain program quality and meet future demands?
Well, thank you so much for the question. In today's Ontario, we have a government that's basically told colleges and university that your model is to just invest in getting international students and they can make up all the cuts that this government has made. So I think first and foremost, it's about fairly funding our colleges and universities, because if we want to grow the people of tomorrow and if we want to invest in our young people, we need strong opportunities for them in post-secondary. So that's the first thing. The second thing is working with them on innovation, because we need to think about the jobs of tomorrow and what kind of programs we can educate them with to make sure they have the best foot forward, because things are changing. With things like AI, things are going to look different in 10 and 20 years, and even the training that I received at university isn't meeting the mark. So I think first and foremost, we need to invest in our colleges and universities. We need to work with them and making sure we have an operating model where there's enough spaces for students right here in Ontario. And a great example of that is investing in our northern medical schools. So we don't have enough doctors here. There's about 25% of us here in Thunder Bay, Atikokan, who don't have a family doctor. We need to invest more units, more spaces for students in medical school. And that's a great way of retaining those students in our communities. Thanks.
In 2018, when we were at Queen's Park, colleges and universities were already in crisis. They were underfunded and were being supported predominantly by international students and gouging them with very high tuition rates. Student groups would come to us and talk about the unfairness. So this is a long-standing problem. The Doug Ford government didn't help. And with the freeze on international students, many of our northern universities and colleges are in danger of closing. It's a dire straits. We've seen amazing innovation. The colleges have turned themselves inside out. The universities have had cooperation with the colleges and with other organizations. They have tried, they've been studied. But we need a commitment to education. We have a government presently that is anti-education, by the sounds of it. But if you have money and can support that, that's fine. But if you are, and that's where colleges and our universities were created, so that working class people could actually go to university, and we could have, get the potential from everyone. We have world-class people coming out of our university. The alumni is amazing. The college is amazing. We see them. So we need the commitment to support our education, and we need to work together to make that happen.
All right, thank you very much. So it is now time for our closing statements, which will be starting with the Thunder Bay Superior North candidate, Brian. You have 90 seconds.
The Ontario Liberal Party is the only party that could effectively halt Doug Ford's power grab. The Ontario Liberal Party is also the only party that can effectively work across party lines to advance the priorities of the North. We cannot and must accept being in the political shadows for the next 4 years. People are struggling, and the crisis at our doorstep is a call to action. The NDP have failed to deliver on economic development that our region so desperately needs. The NDP is asking for your vote without having the capacity to govern or the ability to build the relationships that it takes to inspire good policy and private sector investment. A vote for Brian Hamilton and the Ontario Liberals is a vote for strong social policy, environmental stewardship, and jobs close to home. Where the NDP will lead with indecision, we will lead with science, evidence, and experience. We will support the frontline leaders, the organizations, labor unions, and community groups that understand best how to move our communities forward. We will listen to our educators and parents on how best to serve the kids and innovators of tomorrow. We will listen to our businesses, both large and small, and help them build the jobs and opportunities in a strong and vibrant Thunder Bay Superior North. It is possible. We could build a better future together. I ask for your vote February 27th. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Lise?
All right, I'll just proceed my comments with the Liberal Party has not even had status as a party for the last 7 years. While the MPP for Thunder Bay Superior North, I have made the carnage on our highways an issue that can no longer be ignored. The lack of driver training has not come out of the blue. Conservatives allowed trucking companies to do their own training and licensing, and the Liberals privatized drive test centres. The Ontario NDP knows what needs to be done, and we won't rest until testing and licensing have been brought back under the control of the Ministry of Transportation. As the official opposition critic for seniors, accessibility, the WSIB, and injured workers, I have worked closely with advocacy groups for all of these affected people. I presented a bill to create a seniors advocate position, and I have a bill ready that returns the WSIB to its original purpose of supporting injured workers. I don't want to lose my time. And I continue to work to end the terrible practice of denying seniors and people with disabilities the right to receive visitors of their choice. Over a year ago, the Ontario NDP announced that we will return responsibilities to the province that have been unfairly downloaded to municipalities, a practice which has left communities no choice but to cut services and increase property taxes. This downloading will be reversed under an NDP government. My colleagues and I have the experience, the expertise, and a proven commitment to supporting the things everyone depends on: healthcare, education.
Thank you, Lise. Your time
Thank
is
you.
up. Thank you. I'd like to continue with the Thunder Bay Atikokan candidate, Judith, please.
Thank you. You have one question to ask yourself in this election. What do you want your Ontario to be moving forward? Do you want an Ontario where people have a doctor, Do you want an Ontario where the environment matters? Do you want a doctor? Do you want an Ontario that has addresses homelessness, where people can afford a house, where people can afford to eat? Or do you want an Ontario to continue on the way it is, with everything getting far worse? It was bad in 2018. It's worse after 7 years of the Doug Ford government. The NDP and Marit Stiles as leader has fought back against Doug Ford. She has the experience. We won the Green Belt. We won that fight. We've won the fight of QP workers with the help of community partners. In the NDP, we're there to work together with everyone. We're not we're not anti-industry, we're not anti-anything. People come to us and we work together. Personally, I think I have the experience, I care about people, and most importantly, I show up. So vote for me.
Thank you. Your time is up. And Stephen?
So elections are about choices. Doug Ford made a choice in calling an unnecessary and expensive election in the middle of winter. He did it for one person, himself. Instead of offering more for you, he only cares about securing his job for another 4 years. My Conservative opponent also made a choice tonight. But this election, you have a choice. You can choose to leave behind a government focused on themselves and their rich friends, or an Ontario Liberal government that gets back to the basics. It's time for a government that focuses on strong public services, that builds affordable housing, and one that invests in our infrastructure and communities. In these times of division, it's important for Ontarians to come together. I saw firsthand how a government investing in public transit in the GTA can lead to job growth and economic spin-offs here in Northwestern Ontario. Through my private and public sector experience, I know I have the skills and a voice to make your concerns heard. And it's time for a fresh start, and I want to be your champion at Queen's Park. You know, apathy only ensures another Doug Ford win. Ontario Liberals are best placed to beat Doug Ford across Ontario and right here in Thunder Bay, Atikokan, so I hope I can count on your support.
Awesome. Thank you, candidates. So that concludes our community forum with the Ontario election candidates hosted by Anishinaabe Business Professional Association, Aguasaguin Chamber of Commerce, Thunder Bay and District Labour Council, Thunder Bay Public Library, Thunder Bay Real Estate Board, and the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce. Rogers will be airing the recording of this event on the Rogers Community Channel, and it will also be posted on their YouTube channel. Our thanks again goes to Confederation College for being our venue host. We'd like to thank you all for being here. We hope that the information provided will be helpful in your voting decision. Advanced voting is available Friday and Saturday this week, and Election Day is Thursday, February 27th. You can visit elections.on.ca for more information. Thank you.